What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Monday edition of On Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones. Don't forget, check us out on social media at Rich Q on Q, YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q. Keep the subs and the comments and the engagement coming. We certainly appreciate it from our good friends over at Play It Again Sports, our NFL guy, our guru, fresh off a long holiday weekend. That, of course, is Lloyd Vance. Give him a follow on X at Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, which you can hear during the week on 1029 The Game. And, of course, Broad Street South Network online as well. Kind enough to join us on a Monday. And typically we wait to the end of the season, my friend, when we get into Black Monday, Black Friday, not the sales, the holiday sales, but we're getting a little bit of it right now. We'll kind of reset. We'll get into Frank Reich being dismissed in Carolina in a moment, but not a surprise after what we witnessed Thursday by Washington getting absolutely clubbed by Dallas on Thanksgiving, 45-10. They wasted no time. They removed Jack Del Rio, defensive coordinator, also the DB coach. There's a lot of reports now that Ron Rivera is next, but I thought that move had to be made, whether it's going to be in week 10, week 12, or week 16. Del Rio, by all accounts, not liked in that building, not liked around those parts. And obviously, I don't think a lot of people are sad to see him go, but the change had to be made because the defense did not show up on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, Q, it was at a certain point in that game, and at the end, it got really embarrassing. And you and I had talked about it last week where we kind of anticipate this type of situation happening where we know Dallas Cowboys, when they're at home and they have a team that's kind of downtrodden, they're going to run the score up and then, celebrate on national TV, which they did. And it all came together for them. But unfortunately, when you look at Washington, that team didn't show up, really. I know some of the people on the offense were trying to in the early portion of that game, Sam Howell and some of the players, but you just focus on that defense and Jack Del Rio's group just they couldn't do anything. Receivers were running free. Dak Prescott had a very clean pocket, and everybody can always point to, yeah, they traded away Sweat, they traded away Young, but this team is underachieved throughout the season. And I thought it was going to actually happen after Tommy DeVito and the Giants had beat them in Washington, but now Del Rio steps away. I think this is the beginning of the true house cleaning. We know that Joshua Harris has bought this team, Daniel Snyder long gone. And I do believe, like you said, that Ron Rivera may be next. There's not many more moves left to be done.
No, and you think about this. I mean, Del Rio hires his son's high school coach to be a DB coach. I mean, that kind of tells you right there. And remember, too, they were years ago 3-4. They went to 4-3. When you looked at some of the players they had in Ioannidis, Sweat at the time, Kerrigan, long in the tooth in his career, they switched back to 4-3. They had Payne at defensive end. Payne at defensive tackle. Kerrigan went to the bench. You bring in Chase Young. They've had some misses with their draft picks, but you watch that game, even offensively, when Hal had to pick six, you just saw players give up, right? Now that falls on the head coach. The defense did not show. Once they traded away Sweat and Young, you figured it was going to be a rebuild. But now there's also these reports coming out that the players went back to Jack Del Rio and they want him to take back some of the power they gave Eric Bieniemy in the offseason. I mean, just when you think clean slate, everyone at training camp, here they go. They got rid of Daniel Snyder. They're ecstatic. How's the guy? Sweat, Young, Robinson, you got some players. It's turned into another debacle of a season. So if you were to ask me right now, and then I'll throw it to you, not only do I think Rivera's done, because there are reports, I mean, he's pretty much dead man walking, right? No pun intended. But I also think they're going to jettison Bieniemy the more I think about it. Because if you bring in your own GM or your own guy, so to speak, he's going to want what? He's going to want control over the coaching staff, the head coaches, defensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator. And it's not like Harris is tied to these guys. So what's your thought on Bieniemy's role right now with this team going forward? Because we already know Rivera's end is at a near.
Yeah, Q, and I think the enemy, he's wrapped up in a situation. He made a bad choice. He wanted to leave Kansas City and have the opportunity to be a play caller, and they present in front of him, and it's just a bad staff. And last year they kind of limped along. They finished 500 on the nose. They were 8-1, and there's just that cloud hanging over this team. Yes, the sale to Joshua Harris cleaned up some things, but the enemy, he's just not. His mess is not reaching players on his team, and you could see there's a fracture in the locker room, and just no one's on the same page, and a lot of times when a team is bought, you guy waits, he assess, and then he gets his basically his status report, and then he acts
Yeah.
on it. And I think that's what's going to be these last 6 games of this season. Um, he's they're probably going to make some changes, and the enemy, he's not going to survive. I always thought he was coaching waiting Q,
Wow.
but I think he's just he's again he's in a situation where he doesn't have teeth. You know what I mean? Like uh he's not the head coach, so there's players who are going to say, "Well, why should I listen to you?" type of situation. So, he's doing his best. They were putting up. Let's not forget though, they were putting up a lot of points, and Sam Howell at one point was leading the NFL in
Yeah.
yards and
Yeah.
touchdowns and stuff. Um, Offensive line has never been up to par. And ever since Williams left the team and went to the Niners, that group is not blocked well. Howell kind of running for his life. So I think major changes are coming there, and just an ugly situation in Washington.
So going back to your Bieniemy point, I don't know if it's necessarily a mistake. I think he had to get out of Andy Reid's shadow in order to kind of separate himself to show that I can do this. And maybe because Ron Rivera is so inept as a head coach, it magnifies it, right? I mean, at least you can mask it with Andy Reid because they're winning 12, 13, 14 games. They're going to the playoffs. They're making Super Bowls. They're winning championships. I thought the move was a smart one because he wanted to get out of Reid's shadow. Now, can we say it was a different destination? Well, these jobs don't come every single day, right? But to your point, the more you kind of take a step back now, once they get rid of Rivera, they already got rid of Del Rio. It seems as though, where do we look next? Now we got to look at the offense, and it's going to be interesting to see if the enemy gets fired, man, after one season in DC. There's going to be a lot of uproar. Remember now, this is a guy that interviewed 15, 16 something odd times over the last several years to try to get a head coaching gig. It's definitely a scenario that we don't know how it's going to play out, and it's definitely a situation that's worth watching. Now we're seeing it right in the NFL because there are some reports, some NFL insiders believe 6 to 10, 7 to 10 head coaches could lose their job, right? Which, just talk about the turnover we saw earlier today, and again, Monday edition of On Cue. Rich Quinones here, Lloyd Vance joining us. Frank Reich out, right? He doesn't even get to finish out his season in Carolina. And quite frankly, I think he's a very good offensive coordinator. I thought he was going to make a good head coach. I think right now it appears they've missed on that draft pick with Young. I mean, the kid just can't play at this moment, but I've got a problem firing this guy with a rookie quarterback, and in a rebuild stage that you're going to get rid of him now. And you think about this ownership group, we know they're flaky. We know the owner is a Budinsky. He's nosy. And we also know that he treats it almost as like a business. When I get it, you treat it like a business, but ultimately you also have to give these times to kind of grow, these guys time to grow in their role. So are you surprised that Frank Reich got fired?
I was hugely surprised, and they still have Matt Rule on the books. Matt Rule, what he
Yeah.
lasted about two
Horrible
years
hire.
there, and that was he's going to pay him in the next 3 years or so, and now Frank Reich came in there, a real professional coach, a guy who I was around when he was with the Philadelphia Eagles, very well liked around the National Football League, well respected, did a solid job with the Colts, and they started turning some things around there with the Carolina Panthers. Yes, that team is 1-10, and as you said, kind of saddled with the pick of Bryce Young. I don't know if that's really who Reich wanted. Um, and then it also just kind of gone downhill for him there. And the big part that you were talking about, Q, is David Tepper, who's the owner of this team. He's got his hands in the pot,
Yeah.
and he was a partial owner of the Steelers, and he always wanted his own team and wanted to run his own situation. And he got that in Carolina. He was able
Yep.
to come in there. When Richardson, they jettisoned him, and he's coming there and he said, "You know what? This is my team. I'm going to do what I want." And Q, it's a mess. And I heard he was in a locker room, and there was some kind of conflict going on, and he came out muttering. He was very upset. And he's a hair trigger type of guy. You know what I mean? And it's unfortunate for Frank Reich. I know Reich is well respected. He'll be able to get another job with somebody's staff. Maybe he goes with Andy Reid or some of these other guys out there. A lot of tentacles that he has in the league. Maybe Sirianni. Um,
Yeah, but what
but
do you
I just,
expect? What do you expect?
yeah,
Like if you're an owner, what do you expect? Like you made the decision. Owners, we can talk about the GMs, but at the end of the day, the owners sign off on that draft pick. It runs through the flag, it goes up the flagpole, period. So they start the season off 0-6. They get a win against now looks like a good Houston team, even though they tripped up. We'll talk about that on BYP later on. And now they've lost what? Another 4 in a row. I mean, Young, again, it's crazy because the game that he didn't play, Andy Dalton came in and threw for close to 370 yards. I mean, so Young, the game needs to slow down for him. He's no pun intended, a young quarterback. He's 22 years of age. The numbers don't, reek of, man, this kid, I'm comparing him maybe to like a CJ Stroud. That's not fair, right? I get it, but it's where he was drafted coming out of Alabama. Horrible quarterback rating. I think 9 touchdowns, 8 picks. He hasn't cracked 2,000 yards yet. Okay, fine. But if you're an owner, you bring in a guy that's well-respected in league, offensive coordinator, works with quarterbacks, give this some time to grow. And I'm a little shocked that you knew it was going to be a rebuilding stage. I mean, if you're Frank Reich, maybe it's in hindsight, buyer's remorse. Maybe he shouldn't have taken the job, even though, again, as I said with Bieniemy, these jobs are so far and few in the NFL. When you can have an opportunity to be a head coach, you have to take it. But it's just a bad look right now for Carolina.
it is, Q, and they're a dysfunctional organization. We talked about Washington a little bit earlier, and the years of Daniel Snyder,
Yep.
when you see a coaching carousel and they're turning over these guys one after the other.
Yep.
Look at the Cleveland Browns; they didn't seem to get it right for years. They're firing coaches after a season or so. Frank Kitchens and the rest of these guys, and you're seeing the same thing here in Carolina. Tepper should have given Frank Reich the opportunity, and Young too, to have this team grow and at least I always say at least give a new head coach 3 years at the minimum, just so they can clean the locker room up, clean house of whoever doesn't want to be there. And you saw that, Q. They got rid of a lot of guys that didn't want to be on this team, a lot of malcontents, a lot of older type players that they knew they weren't going to move forward with in the future. And I watched a lot of this game. Yes, Tennessee won it 17-10, but Bryce Young wasn't horrible. And he's a rookie quarterback, as you were pointing out. He's going to have his growing pains. He's going to have to um, learn to be a professional quarterback. He had an ideal situation in Alabama where everything was perfect. He had all those 5-star recruits, one of the best coaches in college football history, and he's learning on the job. If this happened in the past, Peyton Manning had a horrible rookie season, led the NFL in interceptions, and imagine if they didn't give that the test of time. So Pepper's got to figure this out. It's going to be interesting, Q, because as you know, once a job's kind of toxic, some people just don't want to go there. Yes, D'Amico Ryans has made it work with the Texans and turned it
Right.
around there, but that's a very different and odd
Yeah.
situation. You see where most times a temporary coach comes there and he has difficulty, and then it's on to the next one, on the next one, on the next one, and then it becomes kind of embarrassing.
Yeah, that's a really good point you bring up. The other thing is, you look at Steve Wilks actually coached these guys up when he was there. The Matt Rule hiring I did not like because I think he's an overrated coach. Thought the same thing with him in college and Temple. Frank Reich took over the play calling 2 weeks ago. Okay. They haven't cracked more than 10 points. They haven't scored more than 20 points since week 6 against the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, they scored 10 in the loss against the Titans. They've got the worst record at 1-10, but it also starts to beg the question where if you really kind of take a step back, now you're gonna allow a special teams coordinator is going to serve as the interim coach. You've got the senior assistant Caldwell is going to be the special advisor to the offensive coordinator. Thomas Brown was going to take over the play calling duties. I get the sense that that's going to be a total rebuild as well. And correct me if I'm wrong, don't the Bears have their draft pick?
Yes, they do, because to exacerbate the problem with Young not maturing at the rate that they thought. they traded up to get
Yep.
him, so they don't have their first round pick. So the Bears have that pick, and the Bears are saying, oh, maybe we'll go get Drake May or Caleb Williams, but or Bo Nix or something else. But it's something that's like, wow, Carolina is very bad. We know that division is the Falcons lead that division now 5-6. So that
Yeah.
all the teams in that division are downtrodden, and it's just ugly situation.
All right. Before we hit BYP on the other side of the break, I do want to ask you, with some of these other coaches, Staley, there's a lot of stuff going on with Staley. You look at Cincinnati taking a step back as well, albeit they lost their quarterback. The Patriots, bad loss to the Giants. Belichick, there's the rumors there. You got Antonio Pierce with the Raiders, a quote interim coach. I mean, so we've seen a coordinator, we've seen a head coach. I mean, I'm going to say as soon as the season ends, we're probably going to see 5 or 6 guys get waxed and whacked quickly. I mean, is there a name? Is there a name that would really shock you if they were to get fired, aside from what we just saw with Carolina?
Now, I do believe at this point we've kind of pinpointed the 6 coaches, the 7 coaches that we think are kind of in trouble now. Um, I'll throw a crazy one out here, but he's kind of turned it around recently. You got to let these things play out. But how about LaFleur up and with the Packers? He's having some difficulty early on. It seemed to kind of turn around the last 2 weeks on a 2-game winning streak. Sean Payton's done a good job. He'll show you. He showed you
Yep,
that team was 1-4 in Denver at one point. They
got to
reeled
give him
off 5
credit.
wins. Now they're back in the race. You got to stay the course. But some of these owners, and you can't tell a billionaire what to do. It's his team, and they want to run it the way they want to. So there are some names out there now. An interesting one, Q. I'll throw it out there as possible. It's like if McCarthy does not get it done in the playoffs once again for the Dallas
100%.
Cowboys, that could be one of the surprise teams because Jerry Jones is another one of these coaches. They're impatient and they want it now, and they see the other teams kind of jumping ahead of them. The Hunt family with a great job they do, and the Chiefs, and it's just a situation where they want to be just like everybody else, but you have to get the right coach, the right GM, and the right quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, they're looking up at the Eagles, and look what Lurie's been able to build over 25 years, sustained success with
Yes.
that franchise. And you're right. I mean, despite of the fact that Prescott's probably playing the best football of his career, we'll talk about it on the other side. Quick timeout. Don't forget BYP coming up on the other side. Lloyd Vance kind enough to join me. We'll go around the league. We'll break down some of these games, give you a little preview of Monday Night Football as well. We'll do that right on the other side.